This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality that you want in this second and better half. And my guest today needs hardly any introduction. And we're talking about a topic that is not unfamiliar to you already, blood flow resistance bands. And this is the guy who actually introduced it to me. Dr. Mercola is founder of Mercola.com. That's been the most visited natural health website for the last 15 years, even in spite of Google censoring him and removing him from the search engines in June of 2019. And I know from hearing from all of you that he is one of your most followed other experts as well. So welcome. Thanks for being here, Dr. Mercola.
Well, thank you for having me, Deborah. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we love all things strength training here for holding on to lean muscle mass, boosting metabolism, and yet I also have a lot of listeners who run into issues with being able to lift heavy due to joints and old injuries, conditions. So blood flow resistance bands, when I heard you talk about them, one of the things that really strikes me when I hear you talk and see you in action is that you walk the talk, first of all, and then you're just so darn excited about, the news and wanting to share this. So talk a little bit about what excites you about blood flow resistance bands.
Well, I've been interested in exercise since 1968. And fortunately, for the first 40 years after that, I was pursuing primarily long-distance running and cardiovascular exercises, which can be used, but if you're going to use one or the other, I definitely would minimize cardio training and really focus on resistance training to increase muscle mass, because that's what's going to keep you healthy as you age. And you could actually get cardiovascular benefits from doing proper resistance training. So the blood flow restriction training is like the perfect, absolutely ideal strategy for the group of people you mentioned who were disabled or had injuries and just can't lift heavy weights. And my parents both passed away a few years ago, and they were both frail, which is not unusual. They were both over 80 years old. My dad was nearly 90. And well over 60, 70% of the people their age have sarcopenia. My parents had it in spades. And at the time, I didn't know anything, which isn't that long ago, did not know how to treat it other than the way that conventional medicine and most physicians approach it, which is to use high load resistance training. So lifting heavy weights. And if you can lift, that's typically defined as 70 to 85% of your one rep max.
Or
so the
10 or
weight
fewer.
you lift once. Yes. And doing that multiple times, like about 8 times. But that's just fraught with problems. And many elderly and injured individuals are simply incapable of doing that. So like my parents, they were out of luck, and they were just, it was impossible for them to do that. So they just continued to get frail and essentially died as a result of the complications, because frailty will radically increase your risk of passing prematurely. So thankfully we have an answer. It was developed by a Japanese clinician, Dr. Sato, over 50 years ago in Japan. And it was pretty much restricted to Japan for the first 40 years or so, until it was brought over to the United States by an American who spoke fluent Japanese and spent a lot of time in Japan and discovered it there and was able to bring it over. So it's only been in the United States for about 10 years or so, which is a pretty small amount of time, which is why it's not widely known.
That is a great explanation, because that has been such a curiosity as I dug into the research. I was like, why has it been around so long, and yet we know so little about it?
Yeah. But, it's really we got a limited time, so I don't have time to go into the backstory. But essentially, what is it? It's Sato figured out that when you restrict the blood flow in your extremities, so either the arms all at once, or both of the legs, usually close to where they join your torso. So, and you restrict it not completely. It's not a tourniquet. You're still getting blood flow, but it's reduced by about 50%. But the blood flow, the venous return to the heart is pretty much restricted. So when you do that and you engage in exercise, you build up these muscle metabolites that increase to high concentrations and produce unbelievable benefits. One of the primary ones is what was thought to be a waste product of muscle metabolism, which is lactate. And the lactate builds to high concentrations, and then once the bands are released, goes into your blood systemically and causes so many good benefits. It essentially causes a cascade of consequences that increases a really powerful hormone that's designed to increase the number of microcapillaries or micro blood vessels. Microcirculation is what we call it in general, but things like capillaries and arterioles and venules, which tend to decrease pretty radically as you age, especially after 60, which is one of the reasons we think that you have this loss of muscle mass, because you just don't have the blood circulation. There's not many things that can increase it. Even conventional strength training, if it could be done at the levels I mentioned earlier, tends not to increase the microcirculation, but blood flow restriction training does, which is why you see radical improvements in muscle size and muscle strength. Not as much for the women because they don't have the supporting hormonal profile. So mostly for the women, their muscles get toned, that rather than getting big and huge muscle bound. But they get really strong, and the really incredible side effect of it is it happens really quickly within a week or two. So it's really rapid.
You just endeared yourself to my audience, right? So muscle tone and rapidly. Okay, you're in.
Yeah. It's really the tone for the women. I mean, which is not a guy thing. The guys really want size and strength. They don't want tone. I mean, at least they think they don't want tone. So, but for women, it's mostly tone. So, and it's just incredible. And even if you're paralyzed and you can't move a limb, or if your limb is immobilized because you're in a cast, you can put these on. And there is a form of it called katsu, which is an odd sounding word, but it's a Japanese word and it means additional pressure, KAATSU. And this system is designed to inflate cuffs and then deflate them. So it inflates it for like 30 seconds and deflates it for 5, and does that in multiple cycles. So if you do that, even when your arm is not really moving and it's immobile, you'll get benefits. You'll improve your vascular tone. You'll decrease blood clotting potential of your system, and decrease your risk of stroke and heart disease. And it's just one of the most powerful things you can do. In fact, it's so effective in cardiac rehab and improving the microcirculation of heart that in Tokyo Hospital is used routinely in cardiac rehabilitation post heart attack.
I'm so glad you mentioned that the rehab, but also the passive use of it. I dug into the research, and I had shared that, athletes, older adults who can't lift as heavy, and even passively, if you are traveling or you're injured, bedridden, sick, you can use it that way. One of our members recently had gallbladder surgery this fall, and so she was forced to be inactive. And she's just now reported that she actually used it when she was not able to move very much. And then Brad said, I loved it, and it's gotten me great results.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, if you have to have an elective surgery, like many people have joint surgeries, and they are really struggling with rehabilitation, but this reduces the recovery rate by about 50%. It's just amazing what it does. It's just almost irrational not to consider using it, because it's just so beneficial, and it really is the secret sauce you need to live, increase your health span, not so much your lifespan, but your health span. That is the time at which you will have a full range of your capabilities that you did when you were younger. So
another great point, because when you were talking about, frailty, accelerating the rate at which, you'll find the end of your road, and also more miserably, right? I mean, you're not going to be living the way you want to.
Yes. Yeah, no one wants to live to 100 in a bedridden and lost and with their mind gone.
Talk a little bit about the benefit, one of them being that you're actually able to stimulate fast twitch muscle fiber.
Yes, and the fast twitch muscle fibers are the ones that are really responsible for the muscle strength. Those are the big ones, and those are the ones that really go through anaerobic or metabolism without oxygen, essentially, so that they create this lactate, and they do it more effectively than type 1, which is primarily using oxygen. So it does that on steroids. And I mentioned that no one wants to be demented when they get older. Well, one of the benefits of increasing the lactate is it easily passes the blood-brain barrier and it goes into the brain. It increases another fertilizer hormone for the brain called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which just causes the nerve cells to grow and helps prevent neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So it's a really powerful tool to not only preserve your cardiovascular health, but your mental health.
Fantastic. And so many reasons why our listeners love fast twitch muscle fiber. We've talked a lot about the relationship to metabolism, but also to reaction skills. We lose those fast twitch muscle fibers so much quicker at a faster rate as we age than we do slow twitch. And we need it for righting ourselves, for even getting your foot from the accelerator to the brake. And all of those small things we take for granted before we're actually there, but we can be working on those things now.
Yeah, and the other thing it does is it increases your overall muscle mass. And many people don't realize that 40 to 60% of your mass in your body is muscles. And it's an important metabolic organ. The primary point to emphasize is that we all know that insulin resistance is a major contributor to chronic degenerative diseases. And when you eat a meal and you have sugar floating in your bloodstream, the biggest sink for that sugar is your muscles. I mean, it absorbs the vast majority of it. And if you have more muscle tissue, you'll be able to absorb that muscle and convert the glucose and convert it into glycogen. And as a result, you'll improve your insulin sensitivity, so you won't get insulin resistance as easily and develop these chronic degenerative diseases as a result of that. In fact, we know Alzheimer's disease, that's one of the reasons it protects against it, because Alzheimer's disease is a type of diabetes, it's type 3 diabetes. So if you can keep that blood sugar nice and low, insulin resistance good or minimal, then you'll avoid many of these long-term
Fantastic. So we've got the muscle, we've got the brain. Talk a little bit about bone density. So, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so sarcopenia is loss of muscle, osteopenia or osteoporosis is loss of bone. So there's not a boatload of studies on this, but the preliminary studies show that it clearly increases the factors that are responsible for bone turnover. So you can see. I haven't seen bone density scans like DEXA scans, pre and post, but all of the metabolic pathways suggest that it would improve it also, which is exactly what you'd predict from traditional heavy load strength training. So there's no surprise that blood flow restriction training would provide similar benefits. It provides almost identical benefits in all the other areas as heavy load or high load.
True. And optimistically, I would expect that, given so many of us are now talking about this, applying it to our audiences, that in the next few years, we'll have a little bit more proof of what does happen, what is the outcome for older adults, specifically with bone density. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And I've one really novel strategy to enhance the benefits. We know that if you exercise when you're fasting, that you'll increase the benefits of the fasting, primarily, which are increasingly important as you get older. So there's a concept of time restricted eating, or using an eating window of anywhere from 4 to 8 hours and not eating outside that window. And if you could do the exercise, a high intensity blood flow restriction training, prior to you eating your first meal, so you haven't eaten for 16, 18, 20 hours, you'll get like double or triple the benefits of not only the exercise, but improving many other metabolic entities and like important molecules in your system, like NAD, which is responsible for really repairing your DNA, running your energy systems in your mitochondria, and running longevity proteins to make sure that you increase your mitochondria.
Fantastic. So if you're exercising in the morning, definitely you're good to go. Just do it before you eat your breakfast and have that high protein meal.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive because you think you would need food to exercise, but it makes it worse. you don't get as many benefits if you are eating. You may not be able to work out as hard, which for some people who are doing high resistance training may be an issue, but long term you get
Right.
far more
Let's
benefits.
talk a little bit about protocol. So with the Katsu training, with the blood flow restriction, there are a couple of protocols that really emerge. Talk about how you address the protocols and if you're a stickler and you stick to that, or you also believe that there's some benefit in just applying it to a routine that a listener might already be doing.
Well, there's pretty standard protocols. The important one to know is that if you haven't done it before, you want to start slow because this is really a marathon. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a sprint. And you really want to do this
Right.
ideally the rest of your life. I mean, Sato has been doing it for over 50 years, and I'm sure he'll do it until he passes. So, and he looks like he's 73 years old and he looks like
Really?
he's half his age. And he's got,
I'll
oh,
have
it's
to
just
find a
incredible when
picture
you
and
see
put it in the
pictures of
show
him.
notes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the key then is to start slow. So normally you want to go instead of the 70 to 85%, you're like 20% of your one rep max. Or if you're immobile or injured, you could even start with just body weights and no weight at all. So it's far better to start with lower weights than too high weights. And then you just build up slowly. So at least the first 3 times you're working really slow, but because the weights are so low, you're going to need more repetitions. So rather than doing 10 repetitions, you usually do like
Mm-hmm.
30 repetitions and then or maybe even 40 the first set, and then you wait 15 to 30 seconds and then repeat that and do that for a total of 3 cycles. And then that's in the training mode when the bands are inflated continuously
Mm-hmm.
rather than going up and down. And if you're doing that, you can only do like 2 or 3 exercises on your upper extremities because you don't want them to be under pressure for more than 15 minutes. Because a point that we didn't mention is that some people are concerned they're going to get a blood clot or anything. And there are forms of blood flow restriction training that physical therapists use that use these wide cuffs that are really surgical tourniquets that do have that risk. And that you need to do a pretty comprehensive history and physical to make sure that you're not going to have that. But these Katsu bands are much thinner and not as wide, and they're elastic. They're not rigid like these other cuffs. So there's less of a risk of a blood clot than even not using it at all because of the benefits that it provides with nitric oxide release and in vascular improvement. So it actually decreases the risk of blood clots. But that is a concern that
Right.
many people have, and this has been looked at.
And let's talk a little bit about that. Any other contraindications? I mean, there are some obvious ones that we want to throw out and make sure that anybody starting a new exercise program checks with their physician. But what else would you recommend? Varicose veins is one.
Um, Actually, I don't think it is. As far as I know, it's not. It should improve it overall because you're improving vascular tone. The whole system improves vascular tone, so it should help them resolve over time. I mean, as far as I know, there's no major contraindications. I mean, they're
Yeah.
used
Right.
for rehab. But obviously, if your physician thinks for whatever reason that you need to reconsider that, then obviously follow their advice. But the literature doesn't really support it unless you're using those wide cuffs. Then the physical therapists use that. Actually, if you're going to a professional, that's mostly what they're going to use, and there's a lot of not politics, but just time that we don't have go into all the details of why that happened. But it's an artifact of the way it was introduced into the U.S. But Katsu seems to be the best application of blood flow restriction, not the wide bands.
Great. And we've talked a little bit, just for listeners so that they're clear, we've talked about like inflation. So that's, and we're talking about the original research used apparatus that are inflatable cuffs, but listeners can actually get their hands on cuffs or bands that go around the upper legs and around
Yeah,
the arms. And of course, if it's not at
yeah,
Amazon, you don't need it. And that's where you can go. flippingfifty.com forward
yeah.
slash
They're pretty
resources. It's there.
expensive. Yeah, but there's several types now. The Katsu bands, they used to be like $2,500, but they reduced the new system. It's called Cycle 2.0 to about $800, which is just unbelievable for what it provides. But that's a lot of money for some people. So you can go to Amazon. You can get these elastic bands, which you mentioned, but there's a wide variety of them. So you want to find ones that are relatively thin, about 1 inch wide, no wider. And these are the ones that are used for your arms. And they're really inexpensive, like $15. So those would work. Those can only do the training. You can't do the cycling because they don't inflate. But you can really get a good workout and give you an idea of the benefits. And if you think that you're finding you benefit from it, then you can make an investment in the better system. But they also have wider ones for your legs, which I don't recommend because it's really hard to tie them tight enough to get to the level of pressure restriction in your legs that you would need to. If you were a small woman, they would probably work. But if you're anything bigger than that, probably not a good idea because you can't tighten them enough to get the benefit. You can on the arms. The arms is not a problem, but
exactly. I've noticed that, and I've got both, and just been playing around with them. But it is much more difficult to actually reach that point of fatigue with the bands.
Yeah, because it's not enough. You could with the Katsu bands and the inflatable ones, but not with the manual ones. It just doesn't work.
Great. Okay, so
it would be nice if it did, but it doesn't, because you need so much more pressure in the legs because the circumference is so much bigger.
So when you say cycling, so you're talking riding a bike or walking?
No, you could do that. That's another way, especially if cycling. I mean, with the inflatable bands, they inflate and then deflate. They do that automatically. So that's what we call cycling, but you can use it you don't have to use weight training. You can engage pretty much every day, unless the weather is miserable. And I live in Florida, so that's pretty rare, that I will go on the beach and walk for an hour and cycle with bands on my legs. And I don't do any strength training with the bands on for my legs. Just all I do is walk, and that's sufficient. And you can put them on your arms, and you could type on your keyboard, and you get benefit from that. So, and I think you get more benefit if you do the weights. But you can't do that with a manual band.
Okay.
But you could use them when you ride your bike too. So you can cycle when you're cycling.
By cycling, just to clarify for listeners, so you're really talking about you've got it on, and for your legs, you're leaving it inflated for 20 minutes, then deflating it. And then
well, it does it automatically. You just have to set up the system to do it, and you press one button, and it goes on and off for 8 repetitions. So you don't have to manually do that, which is what they had to do when they first developed this thing. Dr. Sato himself, he wouldn't even use an automated device. He would physically wrap these people with elastic bands. It was crazy. It was just he was doing that for 30 years until they developed these automated systems. So it's quite a radical transformation of the improvement of the concept.
Crazy. Okay, so is there a question that I should have asked you about?
No, I think that covers it. So other than, there's a lot of area for confusion, and it's a novel approach that many people probably haven't heard of. So I've been writing, doing review research on this, and compiled, I think, a 25, 30 page PDF that has videos and much more detailed information, especially with respect to the protocols. And you can get it on my site at BFR, which is short for blood flow restriction, bfr.mercola.com.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. So listeners, did I miss a question that you have? Please leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/Mercola. I love hearing from you. And if this episode was helpful, please leave us a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. Again, to get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes at flipping50.com/Mercola, where you'll get the juicy download from Dr. Mercola and the resources and links to blood flow restriction bands and more. So what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.